Blood has a smell. You never forget it, especially when it's yours. Rain stitched the night into a single wet sheet, each drop needling the skin through my coat. Neon signs flickered like tired eyelids over the alley. Pink, blue, white, breathing. Color into puddles the way a liar breathes confidence into a room. I moved slow, letting the city talk to me the way it always does, through damp brick and gutter water, old oil, hot copper. Fear had a tinny edge to it tonight. Raw, new, like a coin on the tongue. The kid's scent was delicate, almost shy. An Omega's fear, threaded with soap and warm fabric, carried along the alley's wind currents, then snagged on a chain-link fence. I put my palm against the steel and closed my eyes. The world stopped being a picture and became a pulse. There, on the other side, a warehouse whose windows had been bricked up except for one skinny slit of glass, smeared black. Bad den for a fox, I murmured to no one, to the wet air, to the version of myself that should have grown out of talking to empty spaces by now. A freight door yawned just enough for a skinny body to slip through. I wasn't skinny anymore, but I could still move like a rumor. The gap gave me metal, dust, a memory of bleach, no fresh blood. Good. No stale grief, better. I slid inside. The warehouse was a cathedral of rust, the high rafters hung with ribbons of rain that had blown in, the floor ribbed with tracks. Forklift? 3 days old. The kid had been here. Smaller tread beside the larger, scuffed sneaker rubber, a panicked turn. Then, another smell. Cold and tall, all angles, clipped the way bootlaces sound when you pull them too tight. Authority has a scent. It's polished and sharp. My lips curled. Headlights crawled across the far wall and went dead. I flattened behind a corrugated partition as the main door shuttered, then rose with a metallic groan. Boots ate the distance in measured bites. Flashlights, muffled radio clicks, orders spoken low, precise, and then him. I didn't have to see him to know. The air reorganized itself around his presence, like it always does around a storm front. He stepped in, and the smoke of the room cleared, not literally, but in that way people like him have, centering gravity and cutting through noise with the simple geometry of their spine. Fan out, 2 by 2. No crossfire, the man said. Alpha, head of the pack. I could have bet coffee on it. Black, no sugar, grinds caught under a molar. His light clipped across the floor, caught the forked trail, and paused. He didn't swear. He didn't need to. The silence coming off him was the kind men wear like armor. He moved again. Closer. The edge of the beam grazed my boots and slid away. I heard the shallow drag of breath from the boy who wasn't here. The way fear fossilizes into spaces and leaves bones only I can touch. I pressed my own breath to the back of my throat, quieted my heartbeat, and shifted my weight to the balls of my feet. When you've survived cages, you learn to become all hinge and spring. Clear left, someone reported. Clear right, someone echoed. The storm front stopped a yard from my partition. I thought about fate, and then I thought about coffee again because habits are shape-shifting animals, and mine has sharp teeth. The flashlight arced, white, cutting the dark. It found me, brief as a kiss, and held. We stared, me half in shadow, him all clean lines, tall, squared shoulders under a wet dark uniform, jaw like a warning. The rain had beaded on his hair at his temple and tracked a bright path along the angle of his cheek. The insignia on his chest was neat and silver. Helix Security. Of course. The smell of cold metal and fresh decision. He didn't raise his weapon. He didn't have to. His voice did enough. Hands. Where I can see them, I smiled like an old knife. And here I was thinking this was just a bad date. His mouth didn't move, but his focus sharpened, and suddenly I could feel the outline of my own name in his gaze. He hadn't asked for it. Men like him collect names later, like evidence. Search him, he said. 2 officers moved in by the book. The book didn't account for me. I let them get close enough to smell their detergent. Department issue powdered, budget brand, citrus trying and failing to be. Intimidating. Then shifted right, a small change in weight, a little borrowed gravity, and the first man's wrist met empty air. I put my back into a roll behind the forklift's dead shadow and told my limbs, to stop acting like they belonged to a human who'd been sleeping badly. They listened. Mostly. "Stop!" the alpha's voice snapped, and it did funny things to my spine. I didn't stop. "Raven," one of them said like he already knew me. Maybe he did. I get around. Disappearances are a hobby. Freedom is a job. I slid along the forklift's cold flank and vaulted the pallet stack, landing on quiet feet and the promise of my own exit. The alpha was already pivoting. He had good instincts, I'll give him that. He cut me off clean with his body, not even winded. Up close, his scent took over the room, steel and winter, peppered with something like restraint. He wasn't hiding his rank. His rank wore him. I spotted the thin, elegant clasp of his comm on the collar, the clean badge, the unfrayed glove seam. People who take care of their equipment are either very good at their job or very afraid of losing it. Maybe both. "How do you want to do this?" I asked. "You arrest me, I make a scene. I leave, you pretend you didn't see. We both get to keep a little dignity. Dignity isn't my metric. Tragic." I tipped my head. "Then what is compliance?" We're going to have a compatibility issue." His eyes flicked, once, to my hands. I obliged him, spreading my fingers to show nothing sharp, nothing warm. I didn't feel like bleeding tonight. He nodded to his officers again. "Search him," he repeated. They came forward as if they'd never been born afraid, brave, or new. Either way, my least favorite flavor. I let them get a hand on my shoulder, a courtesy more than a concession, then slid out from under it, the way oil refuses to be grasped, pivots on a sheen. The second officer lunged. I helped him change his mind with a wrist redirect and the softest pressure to the elbow. No harm. Just a conversation between bones. "Don't," the alpha said. And this time I heard the edge. Not fear, calculation. He was measuring the distance between my exit and his decision. "You really don't want to do this," I told him. "I'm working the case." He didn't lift a brow. "You arrive first at 4 scenes in 30 days. You don't wear an agency pin. Your license says, consultant." "I have allergies," I said. "To bureaucracy." "Who sent you?" "The mother," I said. "She couldn't get past your receptionist." He held my gaze. The officers waited, hands hovering in the air like they wanted to be useful to their future. The rain pattered in like static. "You're obstructing an investigation," he said. "You're obstructing my client's hope." "Cute," he said, and I almost smiled because it wasn't, and we both knew it. His light dropped briefly to my chest, habit, not leer, and caught on my shirt where the coat had fallen open. For a second, the world got too tight. I pulled the lapel closed. Reflex is a country where I still hold citizenship. What's your name?" he asked. "You first," I said. "Keir. He answered without a whisper of hesitation. Of course he did. People with spines like bridges don't believe in the river winning. I let the syllables settle. Keir tasted like flint and edges. "Raven," I said, and gave him the lie that was also a truth. "Raven what?" "Just Raven." His comm cracked, a voice bleeding through. "Captain Ashland, we've got something outside. Small prints. East fence." Keir's focus didn't leave me. It stretched and thinned. Elastic. But it stayed. "You're going to turn around," he said. "And you're going to let them search you." "I'm going to turn around," I echoed. "And you're going to look away." "Why would I do that?" "Because you're about to choose between me and a child. I'd hate to ruin your night." His jaw flexed. That was the only warning. He moved. Fast. Cleaner than he looked. Hand shooting to catch my arm. I let him touch me. Warmth lit nerve. Brief and bright. Then I wasn't there. The trick isn't strength. The trick is timing, weight, angle. The rib of the forklift. The slither of wet concrete. The memory of other corridors where the floor hummed and the lights watched. I took the warehouse's edge into my body and slipped through its seam while their flashlights stuttered. "East side," someone yelled. "Don't lose him," Keir said. No shout. Command traveled through the room like current. Outside, the night swallowed me down to a fast heartbeat and the taste of iron. I scaled the fence, the chain links cracking under my boots, the wire biting polite crescents into my palms. Raindrops stitched my hair to my forehead. Somewhere a siren decided to be relevant. I landed on the other side in a crouch and paused. The kid's fear rode the wind, tangled with fresh tire rubber, old bread from the corner bakery, the ghost of cinnamon, hope. I turned left. Behind me, boots fanned out again. Keir's steps were a center point, measured, unhurried, the stalk of a cat that has already mapped the room. I could feel him sensing me without touching me, like two magnets talking across a desk. I gave him a parting gift because I'm sentimental like that. The wall near the fence was smooth concrete, rain sleek. I set my hand and let the other thing inside me breathe for the span of a pulse. Not much, just enough. Claws sang out of skin, kissed stone, and left 4 deep, tidy lines like signatures. It hurt. It always does. I bit the inside of my cheek and tasted a thin ribbon of copper that wasn't metaphor this time. The claws slid back where they belonged, and the pain became a price I was still willing to pay. I moved into the night. The city opened, rain softened, and the smell of fear thinned as if afraid of being found. They reached the wall a minute later. I didn't turn, but I felt the logic of their light sweep over the claw marks. Felt the brief hush as men recalibrated their understanding of the world. Keir stood there longer than the rest. I could tell by the way the air waited. I didn't look back, but I could feel the air still around him, the way silence changes shape when a man decides something. He wouldn't say it out loud, not here, not yet, but I knew what I'd left on that wall had rewritten his file on me, not Omega, Predator, and that was going to make everything harder. And, annoyingly, more interesting. The room was designed to erase people. Cold table, colder chairs, a pane of one-way glass that breathed disinfectant and judgment. The lights buzzed with the confidence of things that never blink. My wrists rested on the table, cuffed for form rather than function. The metal bit like a polite dog. They'd picked me up 2 hours after the warehouse. No sirens, no theatrics. A cruiser eased to the curb while I was buying a stale croissant from a street vendor with too much cologne and not enough sugar. I didn't run. Sometimes the right move is to let the river think it's carrying you. The door clicked. He stepped in. Keir Ashlan wore authority like a fitted suit, no loose threads, no second chances. He set a case file on the table, closed the door with his heel, and didn't. It sit until I had to notice that he was choosing to remain standing. "Raven," he said. "Captain," I nodded at the file. "That my greatest hits?" "Working theory," he said. He slid into the chair opposite me. "You show up at every crime scene." Coincidence? Maybe I just have bad timing. Or good instincts. One corner of his mouth thought about moving and didn't. He flipped the file open. Photos, fences, smeared prints, warehouses with their teeth knocked out. On the last page, a list. Names, ages. Omega, Omega, Omega. The room smelled like bleach and paper. Under it, a thinner thread, caffeine, bitter, unsweetened. I glanced at the cup near his elbow. "I'd say you have trust issues," I told him, "but you don't seem to trust even your own coffee." "I prefer it unadorned," he said. "Of course you do." His gaze skimmed my wrists, went back to my face. "You resisted arrest. I resisted boredom. You evaded my officers." Evaded is such a strong word. I suggested an alternate route. He didn't sigh. He read a paragraph aloud instead, voice steady enough to balance on. 3 disappearances on the South Belt within 16 days, each within 1,000 meters of a decommissioned Helix facility. You arrived on scene before or at the same time as our units. He lifted his eyes. How? Word travels fast when you listen. I tilted my head toward the glass. Also, when your receptionist puts mothers on hold. His jaw flexed. We don't take walk-ins. Monsters rarely make appointments. He ignored that. Or maybe he filed it. He had the face of a man who knew where he kept things. You said you were hired by the mother last night. I did. Name? Doesn't matter. It does, he said, sharper. Because if you're lying for her, I will find out. And if you're lying to me, you'll do what, Captain? Confiscate my sarcasm? His silence had weight. The glass hummed with the attention from the other side. I let the quiet sit in my lap like a wary animal, and stroked it once with calm. "You smelled the fear," he said finally. "At the warehouse." "I smell a lot of things." He leaned an inch closer. "Like what?" "This room," I said. "Disinfectant and paint." Someone touched up the scuffs near the door. "Your cup. Recent. Your hands. Clean, but there's cordite under the soap. You were at the range this morning. You carry your stress in your left shoulder. The muscles tight. And the air, he prompted, soft, like we were at confession." "It's wrong," I said. "Wrong the way it gets in hospitals, when the windows won't open. Whatever was in those labs left a residue. It sticks to concrete. Gets in the pipes. You can paint over it. You can't convince the molecules to forget." Something flickered in his eyes. Not belief, not yet. But the choreography of his skepticism shifted. "We decommissioned Helix facilities 3 years ago," he said. "You say we like you signed the papers personally." He didn't take the bait. "They're empty. Empty buildings don't eat children." He tapped the file with 2 fingers. "Correlation isn't causality." I smiled without showing teeth. "And yet, if I put your badge near a magnet long enough, the metal remembers." Keir folded his hands. The cuff light caught the clean line of his knuckles. "Help me understand something. You don't carry an agency pin. Your license is creative. Your presence is consistently unhelpful to my officers. Why are you really there first?" "Because I don't wait for permission to care," I said, and the sentence came out faster than I meant it to. I let it stand. "Because someone needs to get to the scent before the rain washes it clean." He watched me like he was trying to line me up with a silhouette only he could see. "You're not a cop. Thank God. You're not a social worker. I'm allergic to paperwork. What are you? Useful. Prove it." The word lit something at the back of my skull. A switch, familiar and hated. I rolled my shoulders against the chair's hard back. "Your reports have holes. Point them out." I nodded at the file. He slid it across. The paper crinkled under my fingers. "Whisper loud." I flipped to a photograph of a fence, the east side of the Beltway lot. "Here." I tapped the corner. "See the scrape? Fresh but shallow." "Your report says adult." The fiber caught on the barb is acrylic blend. Cheap hoodie. Kid sizes use a different dye ratio. If you run it, you'll get a color code that vendors pushed last quarter to discount retailers in the inner rings. Keir didn't move. "You could have planted that." I met his gaze. "I could have, but I didn't." "Check the timestamp on your own body cam from the first officer through the gate." He pans too fast, misses the bottom left quadrant. The second officer's cam catches it for half a second. "You won't see the fiber, you'll see the scarf end flutter." "Wind direction?" "West to east that night." The scarf got snagged leaving, not entering. He stared for a beat, then flipped a page. "Next hole." I turned to a page with a warehouse schematic. "The forklift tracks. You marked the turn in like the operator hesitated. He didn't. The weight distribution's wrong. The center of gravity is backloaded. Someone added a crate after the turn. If you pull the footage from traffic cams, on the south approach you'll see a rental flatbed at 213. It bruised its right rear tire on a curb because the driver underestimated the turn radius. Shop records will show a repair this morning within 2 miles of the facility." He didn't write anything down. He didn't need to. People who file things don't trust pens to remember. "And you know all this because—" "Your instincts," he said. "Because I pay attention." I lifted my cuffed hands an inch. "Because some of us learned the world's language the hard way." His gaze dropped, quick, to the cuffs. "You can take those off," he said. I arched a brow. He nodded, and the door opened almost before the order left him. A uniform stepped in, removed the cuffs, and left without looking at me. Keir waited for the click before he spoke again. "You want something," he said. "I want access," I said. "Updates when you get them. Clean copies of the decommission records for Helix facilities within city limits. And I want you to stop treating the mothers like suspects when they come to your desk without an appointment. That last one isn't your call." "Neither are the children," I said. And then I softened it with a voice I barely recognized as mine. But they're running out of places to be found. He sat back. The chair didn't dare squeak. What do I get? Me. His brows edged up a fraction. Meaning I tell you where your reports are wrong before your boss does. Meaning I go places your badge chokes on. Meaning if the kid moves tonight, I smell it first. And you do this. Why? For a fee? For sleep, I said simply. When I can get it. A silence opened, narrow at first, widening like a river mouth. On the other side of the glass, someone shifted. It smelled like impatience. Keir's eyes didn't leave my face. All right, he said at last. Conditional cooperation. You work under observation. You don't interfere with arrests. You don't compromise scenes. I don't make promises I can't keep. You'll make these. I drummed a finger once on the table, then stilled it. Observation, it is. He closed the file. The movement sounded like an agreement falling into place. You'll be assigned a liaison, he said. No. I leaned forward, elbows on cold metal. You want me useful? You keep this direct. Cut the leashes. It'll save us both the embarrassment. I don't cut leashes, he said. Maybe try it once, I said, and didn't let myself smile. We stood at the same time. It felt like choreography, and I hated that it felt like choreography. He gathered the file, my cuff marks tingling like shallow constellations on my skin. At the door, I paused. One more thing. He waited. The Helix sites. I nodded toward the file under his arm. They're not just near the disappearances. They're the bait. Someone's rerouting patrol patterns to leave gaps around the perimeters at predictable times. I lifted a shoulder. Maybe a coincidence. Maybe not. Do you have? Not yet. But I recognize a pattern when it tries to pretend it isn't one. Keir's jaw shifted, not quite a clench. I'll look. Do that, I said. The handle was warm under my palm, the corridor cold beyond it. I took a step, then looked back over my shoulder. Try not to shoot me in the back, soldier boy. I don't shoot allies, he said. Good thing I'm not one, I said lightly. He watched me go. I could feel his gaze on my shoulder blades, like a new weight I wasn't used to carrying. Out in the corridor, the air tasted slightly less like bleach. I didn't turn around because I didn't need to see his face to know what it was doing. For the first time since we met, Captain Keir Ashlan wasn't perfectly centered in his own gravity. He was tilting, just enough to notice. I walked out under the buzz of lights, filed the smell of the place into the back of my skull, and let the door close on the cold. The city's archive smelled like tired paper and older secrets. Dust lay in the air like a rumor. The fluorescent lights hummed the way bees do when they're trying to sound official. Keir flashed a badge and the clerk's spine straightened into compliance. Mine stayed curved the way it does when I'm trying not to inhale too much of the past at once. Helix decommission records, Keir said, polite without warmth. The clerk slid us a stack of folders and a tablet with access to scans. I took the paper because paper is truer when it lies. Keir took the tablet because machines like him. We didn't talk. We worked. Pages cracked softly, tabs flicked. The little mechanical sounds of two. People pretending the world can be put back together with staples. Helix sites. Addresses. Closure logs. Inventories marked destroyed. Photos of empty rooms too clean to be innocent. Whoever had signed off on these had a confident pen and a taste for finality. Look, I said, tapping a map printout. South Belt facility. The closure date is clean, but the utility draw didn't drop to baseline for 6 months. He leaned in. His shoulder brought winter with it, cold air, colder discipline, maintenance, or occupancy, I said. And here, east tunnels. There's an old service conduit running under the orthopedic wing. I traced a line with my finger. If you wanted to move something without street cams seeing it. Something, Keir repeated. Or someone. I didn't look at the names column again. My throat was already the wrong size. We cross-referenced site numbers with city maintenance orders. 3 decommissioned buildings had contracts for pest control delivered after the date of closure. The same vendor. The same signature. Pattern, Keir said. Pretending not to be a pattern, I said. His eyes flicked. I wondered if he remembered the line from the interrogation room, or if he never forgets anything. We signed out a key to the East Service tunnels, and the clerk wished us a good night with the fake cheer of someone who never leaves their desk after dark. Out on the street, the air had rinsed a little. The rain had dragged the city down to its bones and left it clean enough to smell the oil in the concrete. We found the tunnel entrance behind a maintenance gate that didn't squeal when it opened. That told me more than any logbook could. The padlock smelled like fresh graphite. Someone loved this door recently. The descent was an iron throat. The echo of our boots came back with an extra set like ghosts who couldn't keep time. I let my hand brush the wall. Rust, water, spider maps of old leaks. Under it, antiseptic. The kind that sits in the nose and refuses to leave even after you beg it with coffee. My palms went slick. My breath went shallow in the way it does when a memory thinks it has the right to be a present. Light, Keir said, and clicked on his headlamp. The beam caught the curve of pipe and the papered-over caution stencils. He glanced back. You okay? Thrilled, I said. Huge fan of interior design that screams sterile nightmare. He didn't smile. He adjusted the beam down so it wouldn't hit me in the eyes and kept moving. We turned left where the conduit widened, and the air took on that metallic tang you taste when your mouth remembers blood. I touched the concrete and my skin crawled with old electricity. The orthopedic wing had been shuttered years ago. The door that led to it from the tunnel should have been welded. It wasn't. The seam had a clean gap, like a mouth waiting to say again. Stay behind me, Keir said, which was adorable. I slid past him and eased the door enough to smell the room beyond before committing to sight. Bleach, latex, ozone, the absent smell of windows that never opened. A chair scrap that scuffed the linoleum a long time ago and still insisted on being heard. I didn't mean to, but my body remembered something my mind avoids. The click of a tray, rolling, the hush of a glove being snapped on, the way the air held its breath for me. Voices surfaced like knives held just below water. Hold still, Omega. It's only a test. Subject 13. The room blurred at the edges. My throat cinched down to the width of a needle. I could feel the exact shape of the veins in my arms even though they were under sleeves and time. Raven. Keir's voice. Close. Low. Not in order. I forced my eyes to focus. The headlamp's halo made a small island on the floor. On it, a footprint like a child's. Too narrow, too light. My lungs forgot how to do this long ago and never perfected it again. I reached out to the wall and the wall came away with a little of my steadiness. Back out, Keir said, steady, like he was talking to a skittish animal that could take his hand off without meaning to. Slow. I'm fine, I said, and heard the lie rustle like paper. He didn't contradict me. He just angled his body so that I could lean into his orbit without making a ceremony of it. He smelled like soap that doesn't advertise, gun oil, and the thin edge of adrenaline. My fingers trembled once against the sleeve of his uniform, and then obeyed. We found a corridor of little rooms pretending not to be cells. The beds were narrow and bolted. The cabinets had locks that had been removed with the care of someone who wanted to be proud of their cleanup. In a sink, the rust ring made a crown where something metal had sat and sat and sat. In one room, the wall paint bubbled where a poster had been torn away. The clean square was the exact size of a lie. I pressed my palm to it, and the antiseptic smell swelled like a wave that didn't know how to stop. My vision went white on the edges, and I was cold enough to feel my teeth ache. Raven, a hand, warm, careful on the back of my neck. Keir, not restraining, anchoring. Look at me. My eyes found his because his voice gave them a reason. The headlamp ringed his face with something like a halo if halos were made of intent. The glassy panic in my chest receded a fraction. I'm good, I said, because men like me announce health when we mean not dead yet. We're leaving this wing, he said, in that same no-argument calm. We have what we came for. What did we come for? My voice tried for a joke and almost managed it. Proof it wasn't in your head, he said. Proof it still isn't. We backed out. The tunnels breathed damp relief. The air tasted like old water again, which is a compliment down here. By the time we climbed back to street level, The sky had started its slide toward almost morning. My skull throbbed the way it does after a night of bargaining with memories. Keir watched me like a medic who refuses to call himself a friend. I didn't want to go home. Home has corners that know my name too well. We took a motel because the city offers those to people who can't afford pride. The room smelled like an argument between bleach and stale air. There were 2 beds, a table pretending to be a desk, and a coffee maker that had survived a war. Keir locked the door, checked the corners in a pattern that said he'd been training his body to want the right things for years, and then plugged in his comm to charge. I walked a circuit to teach the room my shape, and lost. The adrenaline sagged. The floor tilted. I sat on one bed, and it bounced like a bad alibi. "Drink," Keir said, handing me motel coffee. It tasted like brown noise. The smell helped anyway. Bitter, thin, honest about its limitations. "Your version of bedside manner?" I asked. "I don't do bedsides," he said. "But I can sit in a chair." He did. He chose the one nearest the door like he always did, his body a hinge between trouble and me. The lamp by his shoulder cast a warm cone that made the rest of the room feel farther away. I took off my coat and my shirt stuck to my back where the rain had dried into memory. I pulled the fabric over my head, and the collar caught, brief, on the spot under my left collarbone where the skin is different. The breath I took caught too. Keir didn't look away. He didn't lean in. He didn't shout, "What is that?" like a man who thinks curiosity is a right. He just saw. His gaze brushed the scar like fingers that know not to touch without permission. The mark sits where my chest meets shoulder, a pale brand that never learned the trick of fading. 013, the Greek curled like a smile that forgot how. The edges are too clean to be an accident, and too cruel to be art. The motel air cooled against it. My skin went tight. Keir's voice, low. "That mark, it's not a tattoo." I let a corner of my mouth lift because habits die even when men don't. "Souvenir. You keep your medals. I keep mine." He didn't say from where. He didn't ask who did this. He sat a little deeper into the chair like he was making more room. For the silence to sit between us without getting self-conscious. "It looks like they tried to erase you," he said. "Maybe they should have tried harder." It came out like a joke, and tasted like not one. The room said nothing. The coffee maker clicked, as if it had an opinion. My fingers shook once on the paper cup and then steadied. I watched the pulse jump in my wrist because sometimes seeing proof that your heart still works is the only proof you get. Keir rested his forearms on his thighs, hands loose. A posture that doesn't spook skittish things. He was very good at not being a wall when a wall would have made me run. He didn't push. He didn't say we should report this, file that, turn me into a case study. He let me keep my shape without insisting we name it. And strangely, impossibly, it made breathing easier. My lungs negotiated a truce with the air. "You smell like fear when you lie," he said finally, the words careful, almost apologetic. "But you're not lying now." I looked at him over the rim of the coffee. He didn't hold my stare like a challenge. He held it like a promise to stay put if I needed him to. Something tired in me unclenched. "Don't get used to being right," I said, softer than I meant to. "Occupational hazard," he said. The lamp buzzed. The rain made soft punctuation against the window. My eyes slid closed without asking. The bed was cheap, and the sheets were scratchy, and the world kept being the world. But I slept anyway because a man who didn't ask questions was sitting in a chair by the door, pretending to be only a guard and failing in a way that made me feel less alone. By dusk, we were ghosts on the city's edge, where the concrete thins and the weeds remember they own the place. The sky bruised purple. The wind came off the freight yard, tasting like rust and apology. We switched cars twice and boots once. Keir moved the way men do who were taught to be the last thing a room forgets. I moved the way a rumor does, through seams. Helix wasn't subtle about being subtle. We felt them before we saw them. The quiet compression of space 2 blocks back, the hush that falls on alleys when surveillance devices start to hum. Keir shortened our silhouette with the angle of his shoulders. I trimmed my scent trail with coffee on my wrists and a handful of crushed citrus peel from a vendor's bin. "Left," I said. And he didn't argue. Old market. Its bones still held heat from 1,000 afternoons, even though half. The stalls were shuttered, and the other half were a memory with lights. Spices ghosted the aisles. Cumin and smoked pepper, star anise and something, sweet, that tasted like childhood if childhood had ever been sweet. Underneath, cut metal, old blood, a tang of copper wire stripped for cash. The whole place smelled like a ledger full of debt. Keir scanned angles. I tuned for breath. We slipped between tarps that snapped like temper and ducked into a narrow passage where the air compressed to the width of a man's chest. He touched my back once to steady my step on a slick tile. The heat of his palm found my spine like it had a map. I pretended not to notice and failed. Your hideout, he said, when we reached the locked roll-up behind a shuttered tea seller's stall. One of them. The padlock knew my hands. The door rose just enough to let us in, then settled with a soft throat clearing. Inside, concrete floor, a table, an old workbench that had seen more regret than carpentry. Shelves with mismatched jars of things I used to confuse dogs and drones. A cot that didn't like me and a dent in the wall where I'd once lost an argument with a memory. The air held the faded bite of cardamom, the linger of solvent, a line of cold iron that always lives in places like this. Safety smells like things that can't be burned. We'll be fine for an hour, I said. If Helix decides to be polite. Polite isn't in their sop, Keir said. He stayed near the door and tilted his head, listening to the building settle. It has a sound, when a place has accepted you. This one had, reluctantly. You're breathing too loud, I said, because quiet was getting heavy. Don't breathe too loud, detective. You might catch feelings. I have excellent respiratory control, he said dryly. Tragic, I said, and the corner of his mouth almost remembered how to try. We killed the light. The room reassembled itself around breath and heartbeat. I closed my eyes and showed him, because if we were going to survive this, he had to learn the language I speak. Forget the eyes, I said. They're liars when they panic. Start with the floor. The floor, he repeated, not mocking me. Tell me what it says. He waited. Then, concrete. Uneven. There's a groove from the door, deeper on the left. You drag your foot when you're exhausted. Only on Tuesdays, I said. Air. He inhaled, not deep, just enough. Metal. Spice. Solvent. Separate the spice. Which one sits at the back of your tongue? He took another breath. Cardamom? Good. That means the jar on the top shelf isn't sealed. Hear the street? Keir angled his head, and it felt like a compliment to the night. Scooter. The engine's missing a beat. A delivery cart. 2 stalls down, someone is counting coins. Fast. Like they're embarrassed. Now, I said, stepping closer, my hand finding his wrist in the dark. Warm, steady, a pulse that didn't apologize for existing. Listen to the space you can't see. The place your body thinks is a door because the air moves differently. He was silent long enough for the shape of the dark to change. There, he said finally, nodding toward the back right. Vent. Good instincts, I said. I don't rely on instinct. He lied. You just don't like admitting when it's right. My fingers stayed on his wrist a breath too long. He didn't pull away. The room said yes to something it had no vocabulary for. We were 2 steps from what would have been entirely the wrong choice when his comm vibrated. A haptic buzz he'd set for priority. He didn't look at it. He's not the kind of man who telegraphs intel to the walls. He glanced at me instead, and I nodded. Go on. He checked the screen. The light painted the hard planes of his face in winter again. New disappearance, he said. Inner rings. Reported 20 minutes ago. My breath thinned. The city's map lit up under my skin, lines drawing themselves from here to there. Pattern. Near a decommissioned Helix warehouse, he said. East quadrant. I was already moving. The market let us go with a creak and a warning. We bled back into alleys, then into the arteries of the city until the skyline hardened and the streets remembered their grid. The warehouse wore respectability like a borrowed coat, new padlocks, fresh paint over old sins. Keir moved ahead, shoulders narrowing his shadow. I slid to the side, letting sense braid a route I could use later. We circled. A back door sulked behind a dumpster. Its hinges had been recently oiled. The lock didn't squeal. Whoever was inside believed in tidy exits. On 3, Keir said. We didn't get to 3. I picked the lock on 2 because Patience and I broke up years ago. He didn't comment, which I decided to count as personal growth. Inside, the air had that hospital wrongness again. Bleach, praying to be forgiven. Refrigeration whispering. The outline of a lab had been blurred into storage with stacked crates and lazy labels. We moved with the kind of quiet that comes from practice and from not wanting to scare the truth away. The hum pulled us to a side room. Keir eased the door and slid inside first, gun low, a line of intent. I followed and immediately wished I hadn't taught my senses to be so good at noticing. A refrigeration unit lined one wall. Inside, racks, vials, each labeled in neat, careful handwriting that tried too hard to look medical. The cold breathed over my skin like a hand that had forgotten how to be gentle. Keir cracked the seal on the outer door and let the cold roll out. He didn't reach for anything. He doesn't leave prints unless he means to. Don't touch, he said. It wasn't to me. It was to the part of me that was already halfway to breaking the world. I leaned in. Blood has a smell even when it's asleep. Omega blood has edges, soft iron and a sweetness that isn't sweet. The labels swam until they didn't. 002, 007, 010, 013. Everything in me went quiet the way snow makes even the wrong streets beautiful. The number sat on the vial like a little crown, and I hated that it felt familiar under my tongue. The room darkened at the edges, and the fear that lives in my marrow came to the surface like oil. Raven, Keir said, the way you say a name when your hands are 2 inches from catching someone who won't let you. Talk to me. I remembered how to breathe, then remembered how to lie about it. It's old stock, I said. A label. Maybe it's not what it looks like. You smell like fear, he said, not unkind. When you lie, he hadn't stepped closer, but he might as well have. The cold air made my skin too tight for the bones it wore. My hands wanted to turn into something with claws again, just so I could have the excuse of being a monster. Say it, he said, voice soft and hard, a thing you can cut yourself on if you need to. Say what this is. I told you, I said, and my mouth didn't know who I was protecting. It's a pattern pretending not to be a pattern. His jaw eased a fraction in a way that wasn't forgiveness. He switched tactics. The kid, he said. Where would they take them from here? I closed my eyes. The hum of the refrigeration unit found the old rhythm of machines that used to sing to me when I was a number. I followed it out through pipes and past the line where the air changed temperature. Up, right. A door that would look like a wall. I pointed. There, I said. If they moved anything warm, they did it fast, clean, with the corridor fans on to hide the smell. And if they were waiting for something warm to come to them, he said, they would stock the bait. I looked at 013 and the part of me that used to be grateful for scraps wanted to tear the entire room down to filings. My stomach did the thing where it tries to climb my throat. The fear scent came off me like heat. I couldn't stop it. The body betrays. Keir went still the way predators do when they discover there's another predator in the room. Suspicion is not a smell, but it has a weight. It settled between us. You're going to tell me the truth, he said, not loud, not military. Church quiet. If I tell you, I said, and the words came out without my permission, you'll stop seeing me as human. Maybe you should let me decide that. The refrigerator hummed. The city breathed beyond the walls. The number looked at me from the vial with the serenity of a brand. I didn't look away because I had spent too many years learning not to, and I hated that discipline now. Raven, Keir said again, and there was a whole armory of choices in my name. I did what beasts do when the trap is made of kindness. I ran. It wasn't dramatic. It never is. I set the rack back with a care that belonged to someone else, stepped around him without touch, and let the room's edges guide me to the door. He didn't block me. He could have. He didn't, maybe because he knew that if he tried, I would bleed for the excuse. Don't, he said, not to stop me, but to ask me not to make him chase. I thought you didn't rely on instinct, I said, and the smile I used had teeth. The hallway took me in, then the alley, then the market that was closing in on itself for the night. Spice and metal, heat and old debts. Behind me, I could feel his attention on my back like a hand I'd stepped out of. The sky finished darkening, and the city turned its lights on one by one like an apology. I slipped into the current and let it carry me somewhere my heart could misbehave in private. The number followed anyway, bright and simple as a bruise. 013. The elevator didn't ding. It exhaled. Cold air seeped under the doors, thin and metallic, and I could taste ozone before the floor numbers stopped lying. They brought me down quiet. No ceremony, just a collar with a pulse like a second, heart that wasn't mine, and a rig that understood leverage better than most men. Blue light greeted me like an apology it didn't mean. Glass everywhere. Panels that thought too loudly. The hum of generators underfoot, and the whisper of fans above, a layered drone designed to smother other sounds. Breath, doubt, mercy. They set me on a kneeling rig, braced my shoulders, crossed straps over my chest like careful hands that never learned kindness. Electrodes bit. The disc at the top of my spine warmed, the world narrowed to a tunnel I could still crawl in if I wanted to bleed for it. On the platform beside me, a small form lay sedated, sweet lab clean, filtered air, sighing, over a boy who looked like a version of me someone had ironed the damage out of. I knew him by scent, before I knew him by sight. Not him. It. The clone wore my notes, but not my noise. Safe engineering. A perfect trap. Subject 13, a pleasant voice said. I didn't give him my eyes. He didn't deserve them. We were worried you'd lost your instinct for home. Must be the interior design, I said. Very prison chic. He smiled in my periphery. Men like him always do, delighted with their own restraint. Dr. Valent, he offered, as if I'd asked. You've cost us so much paper. The collar pulsed, a smaller sun blooming under my skin. My fingers twitched, and the rig absorbed it, proud of itself. Somewhere behind the glass, a door sighed open. The hum shifted. New weight in the room, new geometry. My body knew before my head did. Keir. I didn't turn. I didn't have to. Soap that doesn't advertise. Gun oil. Discipline. He crossed the floor without giving the security cameras something to gossip about. I tasted the decision in his breath before he spoke. It was never about the children, he said. Oh, we care about children, Valent cooed, but some projects require incentives. He glanced at the boy, almost fond. Cloned from your material, subject. We needed a scent you'd protect without thinking. You did beautifully. If he wanted shame, he was a bad hunter. Shame is a door I stopped answering years ago. I looked at Keir instead. He put one hand on the rig, not on me, on the machine, like his palm could memorize the point where this thing could break. Let him go, Keir said. We can't, Valent replied, gentle as bleach. Enhanced omega. Last viable sample. The others, burnout. He tisked. You understand. When a concept holds, you don't waste it. Concept. I remembered the cold that learned my name, and the heat that tried to unlearn it. I remembered Tuesday. The day a lock rusted wrong and the fire forgot to arrive. Survival makes poets of us all when we're tired enough. Raven, Keir's voice found the thread of me under the static. You with me? Define with, I said, and tried for a smile. The disc flared, the smile broke like ice under a heel. Pain widened, precise, then folded itself tidy so I could keep talking. They cloned me, I said, because truth sometimes is the fastest way to stop bleeding. The kid smells like me, without the burn marks. Valent brightened. Confession is so cleansing. Turn it off, Keir told him. Steel, not volume. Captain Ashlyn. Valent sighed. You're at a crossroads. You can walk out with both, a living child and a living asset, if you stop, pretending the river won't carry you whether you want it to or not. He tapped the panel. Or. He tapped again. The collar bloomed white hot. The rig sang. My body arched to the angle pain prefers. The straps did their job. The sound that tore out of me belonged to something with a wider mouth than a man. I wrote it down. I've had practice. I landed on breath because breath is the only floor you can trust. Stop, Keir said, and the room believed him even when Valent didn't. To business, Valent said lightly. Surrender the subject. We wake the clone. You get your hero speech. He smiled at Keir like a teacher at a promising student. You've done such beautiful procedural work for us already. I caught Keir's profile, jaw set, eyes mapping. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking for the seams. There are always seams. He found them. The glass housing the twin generators high left and right, the fat cable, under the platform, the way the emergency sprinklers sat smug and fail-safe in the ducts. Look at me, he said. And when I did, the tunnel felt wider. I'm going to be very unprofessional. Finally, I said. He drew, pivoted, fired. Glass screamed. Blue light hiccuped. The first generator died in a shower of polite stars. The second coughed and went to its knees. Alarms found their lines and overacted. A guard lunged into the part of the room where Keir had already decided not to be. Keir introduced him to the floor with a mathematics I couldn't fault. A third shot punched the main line. The lab's voice went from choir to solo, to the kind of silence that rings. The collar at my neck sparked, protested, and died. Stillness didn't return. Containment broke. The thing under my skin that knows how to count without numbers woke and stretched. Claws slid out of my fingers the way the truth does when it stops apologizing. Teeth found their proper geometry. My eyes knew amber like they'd been homesick for it. The rig, proud creature that it was, cracked, bolted, reconsidered loyalty, and let me stand. 2 guards made the mistake of running at weather. I met them with economy. I'm precise when it matters. I left them breathing. I always do, when I can. The kid, Keir said, chin toward the gurney, voice pitched to cut through alarms. I was already there. A slice, clean. The gurney rolled. I steadied it with my hip. The boy's breath whispered steady soft under the noise. Valent went for another switch. I put my hand around his wrist. Not hard. He understood. No, I said, and the room agreed. Blue died in stages. The smell changed. Hot electronics, wet synthetic rain from failing sprinklers, the iron penny tang of air that's remembered blood. Keir found a service door that didn't know it could be useful. We moved. He first, me and the boy after. We ran through concrete that had learned to keep secrets. Locks opened, because they didn't want to argue. A corridor exhaled us into a maintenance bay, where the city's real breath lives. Water, metal, work. We set the boy down. Keir checked vitals with hands that shook only where I could see them. Alive, drugged, recoverable. The change retreated on a delay, like tide dragging the last of night off the sand. My teeth clicked once, counting. My hands remembered human. The tremor in them didn't ask permission. I didn't want you to see me like this, I said. It wasn't fear. It was relief with nowhere else to go. Keir touched the cut at his mouth and smiled with blood in his teeth, unbothered. You think that scares me? He said. I've seen worse. I've been worse. You should run, I told him, because habit wears a badge too. I should, he agreed, eyes on me, then on the kid, then back. But my instincts say stay. We sat shoulder to shoulder on a crate while the fan above us pushed tired breath into the room. The alarms upstairs made promises to clipboards. Down here, the world simplified to pulse and air, and the faint sweetness hospitals pretend is mercy. I let my shoulder tip into his. The tremor settled. Next time, I said. I picked the date. We're calling this a date? He asked. I looked at my hands. Human, shaking, mine. I don't know what else to call a thing that ruins a room and saves a life. He didn't argue. He didn't need to. We'd already chosen the only end we could live with. The city was still half asleep when I reached the roof. The rain had finished its sermon sometime before dawn, leaving puddles that caught. The first light, and made it look like the sky was still deciding whether to stay. Steam lifted from vents and exhaust pipes, curling into pale ghosts. Below, the streets hummed. Cabs, vendors, the low animal sound of morning machines warming their lungs. I stood near the edge and let the wind talk through my coat. The air carried coffee from somewhere close and ozone from somewhere far. The kind of smell that pretends it belongs to hope. I didn't pack much. A wallet, a lighter that didn't work, and the last of the courage that still answered to my name. Leaving was supposed to feel like freedom. Instead, it felt like muscle memory. I told myself I wasn't running, just moving forward. It's a technicality, but sometimes technicalities are all that separate beasts from men. The door opened behind me with that soft hydraulic hiss I could pick out of 100 others. I didn't turn. His steps were easy, measured, the rhythm of someone who'd already done the hard thinking before coming up. "You don't sleep either," I said. "Someone has to make sure you don't start before sunrise," Keir said. His voice carried warmth that didn't belong in armor. He stopped beside me, not too close, not too far. When I looked, he was holding something small in his hand. A security badge, scuffed at the corners, its metal dull under the new light. My name wasn't on it, but the insignia glinted like a question. "You lose something?" I asked. He studied the horizon for a long moment. The wind moved his hair enough to break the symmetry of him, which felt like watching a cathedral yawn. "You keep running like a beast," he said finally, quiet, almost to himself. "But I keep finding you like a man." It landed harder than anything he'd said with a gun in his hand. I laughed once, a dry exhale. "You sound like you want me on a leash." "No." He turned then, meeting my eyes. "I want you on my team." That word again, team. It shouldn't have mattered, but it did. Because team means people who don't have to look over their shoulders before they breathe. People who get to go home after the fire. I'd forgotten what that looked like. "Bold offer," I said, half smiling. "I tend to chew through colleagues." "I'm aware," he said. "That's why you get your own desk. Do I get a badge too? Or just the moral support?" He flicked the token once, caught it again. "You get the choice." The sun cleared a building's edge, gold spilling like a lazy apology over the skyline. For the first time in weeks, the light didn't feel like an interrogation. The wind softened. I looked at the badge, then at him. His face was calm in the way cliffs are calm. They don't need to prove they can hold. "I don't belong in your world, Keir," I said, because someone had to keep the balance of reason. "I'm half myth, half paperwork nightmare." He smiled. "A small thing, private, real. Good. We could use a myth or two. Paperwork's my problem." I should have said no. I'd practiced saying no to 100 versions of safety. But something in the air shifted. Coffee, rain, skin, the metallic ghost of electricity. The city was waking up, and I was tired of being nocturnal. "Fine," I said. "But if I start growling in meetings, it's on you." "Understood." We let the silence stretch. Not awkward, not waiting. Just breathing. The kind of silence that earns its keep. Below, the streets began to glow, signs blinking alive one by one. The city was pretending it hadn't almost eaten itself the night before. That's the trick of survival. You do it quietly so no one asks for proof. Keir leaned his elbows on the rail. "You ever going to tell me where you learned to move like that?" "Trade secret." He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You plan on disappearing again?" "Probably," I said. "But maybe not today." We watched the light climb the glass towers until it found the higher floors and made them blush. My coat flapped once, restless, then settled. I took the badge from his hand, before either of us could name the gesture. The metal was warm from his palm. My reflection bent in it, blurred, human enough for now. "You sure about this?" I asked. "I've been sure since the warehouse," he said. "You just needed to catch up." The wind shifted, carrying a gust that smelled like coffee and sunlight. I smiled before I knew I was doing it. "If I bite you," I said, "it's not a threat." "Good to know," Keir said, his mouth curving, eyes still on the horizon. "I don't do well with warnings." For a while we just stood there, shoulders brushing, breath sinking in that easy. Rhythm people fall into when they finally stop pretending they're alone. The city stretched under us, endless and loud and alive. The rainwater shimmered on the edges of rooftops like a promise no one remembered making. I thought about all the trails I'd burned, all the ones I'd lost, and the one that had somehow brought me here. to a man who didn't flinch at claws or ghosts. Every beast, I realized, deserves a trail that leads home. And for once, I didn't feel like running. The rain had come and gone again. The city rinsed and polished until even the sky looked clean. Morning light spilled through the blinds, catching on dust motes and the silver edge of a paperclip. The hum of the printer was a kind of heartbeat, and the office of Greyline Investigations smelled like its usual cocktail of coffee, toner, and mild regret. Keir was at his desk, back straight, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He typed with the precision of a man convinced that grammar could keep chaos at bay. His reports were legendary, neat margins, accurate timestamps, the kind of paperwork that made bureaucrats sigh with inappropriate affection. I sat on the couch under the window, surrounded by crime scene photos and half-drunk coffee. The air tasted faintly of printer ink, which was reason enough to complain. I swear this toner's developing an ego, I muttered, waving a folder under my nose. You'd think we were printing with melted plastic and broken dreams. Keir didn't look up. That's because you keep standing over the vent. It's following me, I said. It has commitment issues. He made a sound that might have been a laugh, then hid it behind a sip of coffee. I didn't let him get away with it. Was that amusement, Captain? I asked. Should I log that as evidence? He gave me a long-suffering look over the rim of his mug. If you put that in a report, I'll deny it. You'd file a counter-report, you mean? Probably. The clock ticked somewhere behind him. Rain brushed the window once more, softer now, a reminder rather than a demand. The office lights hummed. For the first time in months, I realized silence didn't feel like danger anymore. It felt like peace trying to remember its lines. Keir stood, stretching the stiffness out of his shoulders, and crossed to the kitchenette. A few minutes later, a second mug landed on the table in front of me, dark and steaming. No words, just the quiet thunk of ceramic meeting wood. The smell cut through the toner's arrogance immediately. I sniffed it suspiciously. You forgot sugar. No, he said without looking back, already returning to his desk. I added it. I lifted the mug to my nose and took a slow, deliberate inhale. Liar, I said, smiling. But you smell like you tried. He didn't answer, but I caught the tiny curve at the corner of his mouth, the one he probably thought no one noticed. I let it stand as a victory. Small ones count. Outside, traffic started to murmur. Somewhere on the floor below, someone was burning toast. The city was waking up again, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to run before it noticed me. Keir went back to his report. I watched the light fall across his desk, catching the edge of his badge, the one he'd once offered me like a challenge. Mine hung from a lanyard now, worn at the corners already, proof of existence, or at least persistence. The name printed on it looked real enough most days. I leaned back, sipped the coffee, it was bitter and terrible and exactly right, and let the smell of rain and ink fill my lungs. The hum of the printer started again, softer this time. Less like a warning, more like a heartbeat we'd both agreed to share. They used to call me a beast. Maybe they were right, because beasts don't need cages, just someone who'll walk beside them. I looked over at Keir, at the quiet precision of his hands, the calm. In his posture, the way the sunlight caught the faint scar at his lip. He must have felt it, my stare, my thought, because he looked up just long enough to meet my eyes. Something wrong? He asked. Not yet, I said. He nodded, satisfied, and went back to work. I smiled into my coffee, let the moment linger, and thought that maybe, just maybe, the scent of home wasn't something you find. It's something you make.